Good start. Yeah, let's just like catch up with yourself. You were saying that when we think about technology, we think about phones and shit, but actually early technology was tools. So like expound on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I teach computer programming to elementary and middle school kids. And a lot of the times when I say words like technology, they think of, like you said, phones, computers, anything that needs electronic device, like an electronic device or needs electricity. And when I tell them like, well, look down, what are you sitting on right now? And they're like, well, chair. I go, that's a piece of technology. And they're like, what do you mean it's a piece of technology? It's like, I mean that it's a tool. Technology is really just a tool to maximize an action, make things efficient, make things easier. It's why we invented things like the hammer or the axe. Being able to chop wood, that like extremely like revolutionized human interaction. Being able to adhere a plow to the back of a cow
Yeah.
and plow a
Yeah.
field, it completely radically changed how humans navigate. And that's what technology does. It changes the current status, or it makes the situation better. It tries to make things more efficient for humans. So yeah, we get lost in that idea that like technology is just some digital thing, and in a way we become utopian about it. Like
Yeah.
all of our views of it are like the most wonderful thing in the world. It's helping improve lives across the world. So yeah, that is far from the truth.
Yeah, I think that like that little missing piece, like you remember in school when we learned about simple machines and we would
I
like
love
put them together to like create stuff. So like, a ramp or a pulley, like stuff like that.
pulleys.
That kind of technology has always been really interesting to me. And I think that that's like whenever I see like steampunk electronics illustrated, I like have like a little like solar punk place in my heart that gets really excited about the idea of kind of removing the concept of technology from microchips. You know what I mean?
I love that too. I'm a big Jules Verne fan, and like the steampunk era, or like that whole genre of like literature. I'm all about it too, and I think it does you know bring this feeling of like nostalgia. I know, like for me, I love movies like Back to the Future, and the third installment of Back to the Future, where they really like the train, and like you see these like the steam engine, and in a way that's like a metaphor for a lot of like the clunkiness of the things that we're doing now with technology. I think like we like when you've got like these big huge machines like steam plowing through, and you like mechanical moving like arms. In a way, a lot of what's going on in our computer is that still like it's like all of these moving components, but we're no longer seeing the mechanics. We're detached from it. The computation that's happening in our computers is like so far removed from anything that we know. We only see user interface. Like
Yeah.
all of it is user interface. I think the thing with steampunk is like the mechanical was in your face, and you saw the pistons moving, and you saw you know the chains chugging. But with our computers, with our phones, these highly complex systems are happening in the background that we're not even remotely aware of, because they've put a catchy packaging right over everything, and you interact via your finger. Like you push the screen, and what's happening in the background is just so complex, and it's engaging us in such a complex way that we are not aware of. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually exactly what I wanted to talk about today was user interface. I like started this, it must have been last year or something. I have a history with web design and advertising design digitally. And so I was kind of getting into web development a little. And one of the web designer websites, I was just reading through a blog, and it was something like how to avoid dark design, or like something like that. And then I kind of became obsessed with this concept of dark design, because as someone that had been a user, I knew that it was annoying, but I had never really had a word for it. And so like dark design is just the idea that like it's impossible to find the unsubscribe button, or like it wants to capture your email so badly that you can't get to the next page, and it tricks people into giving away information or into going to their cart or something like that. And so that's when this first started. But I was noticing, just to connect the dots, they have all these new video apps that are made for your phone. And I've been reading a lot about how the handheld device is where we're moving towards, and we're going to be moving away from desktops. And so I kind of just wanted to like pick your brain about dark design, about like the move to mobile, and how do you think that's going to influence us?
Yeah. So the term that they use for some of what you're saying, like dark design, is like the click through. Like
Mm.
how fast can you get somebody to that checkout screen? So creating a design with a pathway that like guides the user to a destination. And the thing that most people aren't aware of is that they design these websites. And when I say they, I don't want to be the vague, like ominous creature that hides behind in the closet. It's who is they? The programmers, the business models, the companies, these social media giants, or I like to call them digital mining companies. Like,
Mm.
they are understanding human nature. They're studying human impulse. And what they do is they create avenues within their app that guide users on the experience, which is what you do with user interfaces and user design and user experience. In the tech world, it's UI and UX, user interface and user experience. So let's backtrack a little bit to just like, let's strip away technology. So social engineering, architectural engineering, civil engineering, it's really how do you navigate the flow of things within a system? So say, for example, a civil engineer designs roads specifically to guide traffic flow in the most effective way possible. So little things that people or that like cities install into like their community changes the way that humans navigate through that. So speed bumps in neighborhoods, slow traffic down. Um, you've got, I don't know if you've ever driven around a corner and then they paint the trees white.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's like another little design feature that's like, all right, we're going to increase visibility to prevent accidents, because we've noticed that if we don't, people crash into the trees. So it's like, you're adapting your design to maximize whatever your outcome is. In this scenario, it would be preventing people from hitting trees around this corner, because humans are naturally, absent-minded, and they aren't always the most efficient at paying attention. So we have to design things to maximize. It's like why certain car manufacturers, well, all car manufacturers have to adhere to certain rules and regulations,
Mm.
because humans themselves can't. We're by design, by nature, not the most efficient, like at processing things. Our brains are very efficient, but we are easy to trick, easy to manipulate.
Mm.
We're very much like fall into these dark holes and traps.
Yeah.
So yeah, whenever you've got these like now bringing back technology, you've got these developers. They create applications. For example, the endless scroll
Oh my
on your
gosh,
app.
yes. So I've been fucking with TikTok lately, and let me tell you, it is like you can see it, dude. It's like terrifying how even myself that's very hyper aware, like I'm fucking trapped. So what does the endless scroll do? I read about how it simulates us walking through a forest. Have you heard that analogy before?
Forever. I haven't. That's actually the first time, but yeah, I like that. It's like just endlessly. And the thing is, it's novelty and it's mystery and it's like it. You don't know what's coming next. You
Yes,
almost can't
yeah.
guess it, but your brain is being tricked into seeing it because the novelty of it. It's like, oh, you're consuming, and there is a release, in your brain that's saying this is good, this is new. Um, I like to talk about these kinds of things in like layers.
Yeah.
Human nature, we are developed that way. Our stomachs, our brains, and the way that they release dopamine based on food that we eat. So we were designed genetically to, when we consume food, we have this like initial spike, and like pleasure, like this is amazing. And if we continue to eat that same food, it slowly reduces that release of those chemicals. And after a while, you're just like, this food doesn't taste very good. Well, the reason why we're designed that way is so that we could eat variety. So we
Mm.
could eat as a machine be consuming a variety of nutrients. And then as we do that, you eat a new food and you get that same spike. You're like, oh, this is amazing. And then if you eat that again, it slowly starts to curve that down. And that's how we were built, that biologically we pass this down to our kids. Our kids are the same way. They have these spikes. Now, the thing that ends up happening with social media or with these very addictive games is they have destroyed that. Like, you're getting that hit and it just keeps increasing and increasing, and you become addicted. And it might not be a chemical addiction like, doing drugs, but it is a behavioral addiction. And you're almost micro dosing. Every time you're scrolling, you're getting that instant gratification, or when you post something on social media and then a few seconds later you go back to check and you swipe to refresh, or a few minutes later you're like, who said anything? And anytime anybody does, you get that release. And these companies, these developers have realized that, like, they can capitalize on that. They can hold things back and release things based on your reaction. How fast are you returning to that site? I don't know if you've ever noticed when you're using like Instagram or Facebook, there's content, the very first content that it always appears is usually something that's of really high interest to you. So like, for example, if you're really into sports cars, right? And you're into cars, you follow your friends on social media, you've got your, coworkers or family members. But when you first get on the platform and you go to refresh, some of the very first content, if you're somebody who's really into that kind of stuff, it's like car stuff, or if you're a gun lover, it's like the gun stuff. And they try to get you with that stuff at the very beginning to say, hey, you're here to get the stuff that you want. And they strategically place, certain things in front of you to keep your attention on the screen. So I don't know.
Yeah, you answered.
Sorry, I'm like,
I was taking a photo, but
no.
yeah, so those are some examples. This is a term that you used when we were texting about it that I had never heard, and it was that something like the architecture influences the behavior. And so like the impossible unsubscribe buttons, the click-throughs, having things on the first page when you log in. What are some other examples? Like, are there any other examples of architecture that we might not be seeing?
Quite a bit of it. Well,
is that like all that user interface is just manipulative architecture?
That's all it is. It really, when it comes down to it, it really is, because they're gathering information from you. Like I've said before, they're data mining companies. So they're mining your experience, and the more technology they're able to track, or the more hardware that they have to track the environment, microphones, cameras, the more information they're able to get from you, and the easier it is to gamify your experience to maximize time on screen. Now, this isn't a new phenomenon. It's not like all of a sudden people started using iPhones and, now this thing happened. Think back to not even think back. It's happening right now. Vegas, for example. You go to a casino. These theories, like gamification and creating architecture that guides people to certain things, to certain places where you want them, social engineering interactions around like a physical structure. These all are things that were talked about in Vegas. The way that they design casinos, the way that they design slot machines, takes some of the same kind of developer or algorithms that you would use in social media. So the same, like you pull the lever, like that action, yeah, the dinging, ding 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 ding, that like utilizing notifications to target you. So there's a lot happening in the background that they're capitalizing on, and you don't even see it. People don't realize that when you're using face filters, they're tracking your facial expressions. They're listening the algorithms. And when I say they, I mean the algorithms. There's an algorithm that's highly efficient, way more complex than we are, that's understanding and breaking down and parsing, categorizing aspects of you. So yeah, and that stuff is, we don't know what these algorithms are doing. Heck, some of these data mining companies, they themselves don't even realize what's going on, so they're oblivious, or almost like they're drinking the Kool-Aid, and they're like, this is the, it is brought a billion people out of poverty, over the last 10, 20 years. This technology has done so much, but it's also caused social atrophy, where we don't know
Yeah.
how to be social creatures because we're so used to navigating our social interactions through these little black boxes, this black screen,
Mhm.
and um, so yeah, there's what's one other example that I've seen used that really like irritates me. Oh, we talked about this before, how these smart devices will have microphones embedded in them for no reason whatsoever. Did we mention before? I think it was the
I don't
Nest
remember if we talked about
thermostat.
it. Yeah.
So the
But
Nest thermostat. Go ahead.
I remember you were the one that told me that they had microphones in them. And I was like, why the fuck would they need a microphone in a thermostat?
And they don't advertise that it's in there. It's not in any of their like schematics. It's not in any of the user agreements, and they just have it on there. So a lot of it is being used without our permission, which I think when it comes down to it, like what's the best scenario or the best way and implementation of this technology to benefit the greater good of humanity. And if it is robbing us of our most valuable, asset, which is time, then I don't think it is working. One way, and I know that we like to talk about, what's in place right now that is harming us, but maybe like what can we do to change that? Like, what are some of the things that these companies can do to curb some of that? I've had that question asked before, not designing things ethically and
Mm.
understanding, like, for example, before, when you used to go to the movies, there was an intermission, and this was the time for you to pause. Yeah, they wanted you to go get refreshments or whatever, but it also was kind of like a brain break, and we don't have these brain breaks anymore. There's companies out there that are taking ethical approaches to technology. I know you had introduced me to an app that you used. It was like a mindful application that kind of reminded you like, hey, have you done this, and almost like reversing the algorithms on these platforms, like creating a gamified algorithm that helps you stay on track with being more present,
Yeah.
or being more engaged. So I think there's a way to really take some of these tools that they use to hijack our attention to
Mm.
give us back our attention, to say, we're going to use this technology to actually help you create physical engagement outside of the platform, which it does, for events and things like that. These platforms do work, but can they maximize some of these to help, raise more awareness around the loss of time, the hijacking of our limbic system in these, environments. So.
Yeah. One of the really interesting things that we're presented with now is that, when we talk about like the academia system or the government and the ways that we get oppressed, there's always that kind of they, and you kind of touched on it before, that there's like a monster in the closet and it's not really a person and there's nobody we can really blame and nobody's taking responsibility. And I think that we're at a point in technology now where we still have human programmers and we still have human designers and we still have human creators. And so they have the opportunity to take responsibility. And then my fear, which is what we see in our justice system and in some of this data mining algorithmic style, is that eventually, and people already do this, they lean on the algorithm as the they. It's not even a person. There is no one to blame, but humans design the algorithms. And so like, this is a really important time to remind people that do create in the digital space. When I was doing marketing, I was presented every day with a choice to watch someone on the internet, just to use Facebook Pixel or Google to watch where they go, while they're in our site or while they leave our site. And that's a personal choice that I decided, like, I don't want to fucking do that anymore. I don't want to stalk people. I don't think surveillance marketing is right. And so I had to stop. And I don't think people realize, like, small business owners, especially now that everybody's starting an online business and they're buying all these ClickFunnels services, I don't think they realize the contribution that they're making to surveillance. So I think it's really powerful that you mentioned, how to make it, how to reverse it by making it more ethical, but that really does give us the choice, as people that design.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's what tech companies, like that personal responsibility, is what these data mining companies are leaning on as a crutch to say, you know what, it is your personal decision to make, and it is your responsibility what you do on our platforms. And they almost absolve themselves of responsibility, because there is, like you said earlier, a responsibility that these programmers, these developers, these data mining companies, or platform creators, to take responsibility for the ways that their platform is being used and the long-term implications of our social dynamic. So we've talked about it before. Petrochemical industry in its heyday was making a fucking killing. I mean, they were doing some of the most unethical things. I mean, dumping mercury into water streams, open water streams. It's like, whatever, we're making a killing. We're making $1 billion, and here we go. We're dumping chemicals into open streams and polluting the airways, until there was federal regulation that said, you know what, you can't do this. Or if you're going to do things like this, there's going to be severe fines. And it curved that, and I think right now there's spillage going on from these data mining companies that's spilling into aspects of our society that it shouldn't, like our democracy, and they, I keep using the word they, these companies rely on current outdated legislation to allow them to continue to operate the way that they are. So yeah. And what was your question again?
I was just noticing the role that we can take, like the personal responsibility and, the guise of the algorithm, that keeps anyone from being to blame. But it's so funny that they're able to say that it's our personal responsibility when they are manipulating us so heavily, like it's such an abuser dynamic. And I'm sure, we live in a world with a lot of traumatized people. I know I say that no matter what I'm talking about, but a lot of us grew up in a situation where we were gaslit in that very same way. And I think that like technological gaslighting prevents us from realizing that, even our behavior is being influenced, not just our shopping behavior either, also, our social behavior. Have you noticed any difference now? Like, I'm on my phone way more now that we're isolated. And so my eyes have been against the screen. I've been creating a lot of new content. What do you think the ramifications of this time are going to be for humans?
I'm scared. I'm really terrified. And I've made a few posts recently about being really interested to see what these companies are doing right now with this increase in, traffic on the internet, where most of our human interactions are being held in the digital sphere. They're on computers, on devices that are tracking data. They didn't just magically turn off their algorithms because we're in quarantine now. These algorithms don't have to abide by social distancing rules. They've socially isolated us now, and they're monetizing on this. So I'm interested to see what kind of data is being aggregated, what kind of data is being accumulated, and what they're doing with that data, and the analysis behind it. Like, where is the most traffic going, and how are these platforms being used? Because that can tell us a lot about where we're at, and I'm seeing the social discourse of people that I know become so fragmented.
Yeah.
I almost watch social media, either like my Facebook feed or my Instagram feed, not so much because I'm trying to receive content, but as a social experiment that's happening. So I've been taking little notes. I journal a lot, and like certain topics will trend, and I'll write the topic, and then I'll take a little write a little synopsis about what I'm seeing this thing happen. So like one this morning was like Kim Jong-il, like what happened to him? He had a heart attack apparently. So I don't know anything about the specific headline, but I'm watching it, and all my friends, it's spreading, and we don't realize that there is an ideological war being fought and the front lines are happening right on our platforms, right on social media, specifically in Twitter, Facebook, and then some of the more like fringe out there, like 4chan and Reddit. These conversations kind of happen in these spheres, and people are going at each other, and they're not having conversations. So I can see us being further fragmented, especially because we're so isolated from each other. People are saying things to one another they would never say to their faces, like calling each other names. I mean, getting extremely hateful and violent. And that's what that's the cyber effect, that we're having. The effect that, for us before it was utopian, where it's like, oh, it's anonymous, and then we're leaning on the anonymity that these sites create to do. And I wouldn't even necessarily call it work, but we're dabbling in like shadow work, where we're letting the shadow aspect of ourselves manifest through the clicking on this, like, and it is, but these people aren't really actually doing any true shadow work. They're not dealing with their demons. They're not, battling, with their trauma and understanding it. And what they're doing is they've become a conduit for that trauma to be transmitted to somebody else. There's a quote, and I don't remember where I heard it, but it was trauma that isn't transformed is transmitted. So if you
that
can't
is
transform your
so
trauma,
powerful and accurate.
yeah, you're just going to pass it on to somebody else, and we're passing it on to each other. We're sitting there, we're yelling at each other on social media, and I'm watching it happen, and I'm scared. When we come out of all of this, we know that poverty increases crime, and poverty's on the rise right now, and unemployment. Speaking of algorithms, they've designed their site. Well, not necessarily designed it. They like poorly implemented their site, but they've shut it down for periods of time to prevent people from being able to file unemployment. As an architecture. Like they're gaming the numbers. If they were to allow everyone who's unemployed to apply, that's where they're getting their data from. That's where they get the numbers that tell you how many people are unemployed. So if you're like, I don't want these numbers to skyrocket and hurt us, I'm going to keep people from applying so that I can keep those numbers low.
And just crash the site. Yeah.
Oh yeah, crash the site. Only 1 million people. And in reality, the numbers are higher than that. Like it's ridiculous. So, and the more that like these things happen, the more we are believing things that aren't true. We're getting half truths because these, algorithms are being designed to hide things from us. It's magic. It's like sleight of the hand. How can we manipulate what you're seeing, and while we do something else over here? Distractionary tactics.
Yes.
Which for me, it's like I see it everywhere. Like usually when I hear a headline, I don't go, oh my God, I can't believe that's happening. I go, all right, so why is this happening? Like, why is this piece of information being presented to me at this very moment? Or this series of posts from my friends, people who I feel like the algorithm uses certain people who I associate with or who I've interacted with and have a rapport with. Their messages sometimes tend to be the ones that get like pushed to the top.
Yeah.
Or I only start seeing certain people's messaging, and I realize that like certain messages will be implanted through them to get to like me, and the algorithm uses that. It's like, oh, you are really good friends with this person and they have this ideology, and I'm going to promote it to them, and then they're going to promote it to you, or, so.
Yeah, I was yesterday. Was it yesterday? I don't remember when it was, but the story about how Trump suggested that we disinfect our blood with.
Oh my gosh.
And the fact, what pissed me off so much is that there is this tool that Facebook uses. It gives publications that are like, that have a high enough score as like, being journalists, Washington Post, New York Times, and they allow them to offer the option to put a breaking news icon on the thing so that people can say, this is real news, this is breaking news. And that's what it does for us visually. And the fact that they have been abusing that like visual cue, like to say, and this, I mean, I'm just coming into consciousness about this probably pretty recently, because before, like, I would take Trump headlines very seriously, or any headline very seriously, particularly before the COVID, when there was a lot of election news going on, and the Democratic election had a lot of drama. Like, I was fucking in it, dude. Like, I had no ability to discern, because what I was doing was I was leaning on that visual cue of breaking news as my form of discernment. And then now I'm fucking getting my ass handed to me, because that's not true. It's not breaking news that someone said an offhand comment about something that didn't matter, And so everyone I saw, it was sharing, roasting. And I'm like, there are so many more important things going on right now. The fact that they're pretending that this is news is terrifying. Like, people are
Oh,
like
very.
lighting up 5G towers. There are protests in the streets. Like, it's all like that, what exactly what you're talking about, shadow play, smoke and mirrors. I think that's why the study of the occult is really dangerous for them and very positive for us, because it helps us understand that we are manipulated, and that this kind of magic does exist. They're totally manipulating us.
And I think using the language that you use is very important. I've talked to friends of mine before who I say, like, hey, did you know that, like, the Egyptians were probably a lot smarter than we are? Like, societies that lived thousands and thousands of years before us understood things about molecular biology that we're just now discovering. And they're like, what are you talking about? They're primitive people. It's like, and what ends up happening is we don't realize that, like, there's a lot of human nature that is hidden from us purposely.
Yes.
That we aren't processing it as a society, because it's easier to keep you a consumer if we keep you second guessing, undermining your reality, undermining your perception of yourself. And how do we do that? They break you down, and they break down your empathy. They break down your social connection. And that's what's happening with this news. They fragment us by putting these headlines in there and then just watching it spread, and then realizing, like, what's the quickest way that this information is going to spread. And then the algorithms will maximize for that. They're like, oh, this type of language and this type of tag and this color will get the most likes and the most shares. So that's what they generate. They generate this content that's going to keep people clickbaity. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, did you hear what Trump said? And then they're all like, look at us, we're so smart because Trump said some dumb shit. And you're like, you just fell into the trap, dumbass. Like,
Yeah.
it really, like if you give it a platform and you're giving it a voice and you're amplifying, which is what these algorithms do in these social media, Facebook and Instagram, what they're doing is they're amplifying a message that shouldn't be amplified. Like,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Why not amplify the things that are science-based? How do we make scientific knowledge and things that are accredited be more accessible? If you want to go read a science journal, it's hard. You can't just jump on a site and be like, oh, I'm reading science journals now. Sometimes it is behind a paywall. It is behind some sort of institution that we have no access to. So you almost have to pay to be aware. What'd you say?
I was just saying, well, I did a video. I interviewed my friend Sarah, who developed studies. We talked about the classist nature of accessing scientific and medical information. And I think that that's like a huge part of, like, the algorithms are really rewarding media companies because, people do have to a human being has to write a headline if it's for that publication. And as someone who's done content writing, I know that if someone hires me to do SEO optimized content, that's what they're paying me to do, and I have to do it. And so, when we're looking at how it gets so out of hand, like, there is still a human element to it at this point, and it's people making the decision. But the dissemination of information is so lopsided, and I think you are so right about how difficult it is to read those journals. And, we are wasting a bunch of journalists and media creators and news outlets that have talent and creativity and totally could be actually giving us news. Like the fact that we're finding megalithic structures in South America that recalculates how long humans have been here, or how we found hints that astronomy existed long before we thought it did. you know, every day we're finding all of this information about our past that would wake us up to the fact that Egyptians were fucking smarter than us. Of course they were. They didn't have screens in front of their face. They didn't have junk food, right? They had a lot of slavery. They definitely weren't like socially the best, but you know, I think that that cognitive dissonance between what we're capable of and what we're actually feeling like we have the capacity to do is very frustrating for us. And I think that that's kind of where some of the blockages come when people hear this information and they don't want to believe it, or they see the algorithms manipulating them, and they really do, just like the people behind the screen that are writing that headline, they choose to ignore the damage that they're doing, and they choose to ignore the damage done to them because it would be too painful to realize that they've been duped.
That is it's difficult to relive that trauma,
Yeah.
you know, or reignite it and have to like face it, you know, and that vulnerability that we face can sometimes become like we're afraid to expose ourselves because we're afraid to lose ourselves, and in a way we're almost giving ourselves away when we decide not to, you know, act behind, you know, with intent, with like, why am I doing this? Why am I scrolling? Why am I needing to connect? I'm in recovery, and we use a term called HALT. It's an acronym. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're overwhelmed, or you're like, you woke up and you're like, wait, I've been scrolling for an hour, you know, like, we go through this acronym. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? You know, and you kind of
Oh,
check with yourself, like, maybe I am feeling lonely, you know. And well, what do you do when you're feeling lonely? You know, right now people are scrolling more, you know, and furthering that rabbit hole. um, why can't these you know, social media companies introduce some sort of easier way for you to connect with your friends? And they are doing it with, like, you know, hangouts and doing you know, Facebook Live and things like that, like being able to connect people who, like, hey, would you like to call a friend, you know? It's like, or making yourself like, hey, I'm lonely right now, so maybe there's a button that says, you know, would you like a friend to contact you? Would you feel like you want to connect with somebody right now? And, you know, you say yes, and then somebody, you know, I didn't know that Brit maybe had the same need right now, and like the algorithm connected us. You know, it's like, hey, Alex, Brit's feeling the same way. Would you like to connect with her? You know, and we almost like, it helps engage us better rather than like continuing our isolation. You know, and it's difficult to deal with this, especially right now in the situation that we find ourselves in, where everyone's socially distancing and isolating, and isolation breeds so much, you know, of that dark energy in us. It's where we do the things when in isolation is where we do the things that we don't want to show the world, you know, where
yeah, we'll
our
talk about
darkest
recovery. Isolation is a huge like breeding bed for either new addictions or relapse.
relapse and new addictions, for sure. Yeah. um, my addiction is more of a behavioral addiction, so I just have to be mindful.
Mhm.
um, One thing that I realized is social media knows my addiction, and it knows how to put it right in front of my face, and that's where I have to be the most mindful. And I don't, you know, blame them. It's meant to maximize my time on screen and give me the things that I want. It's kind of a good thing. Like, there's some good to it, and with just a few switches in the way that they program these things, it could benefit us.
Do you see that change occurring anytime soon? Like, do you see someone walking into the Facebook headquarters and being like, hey guys, I have this cool idea to connect people instead of having them scroll all day. How do you feel about that?
We're already doing that. That's what our whole platform is about. We already connect people socially, you know, and then you turn around and you do the backhand deals back here, you know. It's like the business model is the problem. And unless we attack the business model, we're going to continue down this rabbit hole. There's nothing that an ethics professor or a group of, you know, moderators is ever going to do if the business model isn't fixed. And they're using the social connection as the like scapegoat, like, oh, we're connecting people, so, you know. And that's what they use to like, um their profit margins, and, you know, their all of their metrics, all their internal metrics are how often can we keep you on screen, click through, how fast can people click through, you know. And that's what they're using to advertise to not us, but to these companies that essentially sell, it's sell products to us or sell engagement to us or whatever it is. So we are being sold to the highest bidder. Our attention is being monetized and then being prepackaged and sold off. So yeah.
And tell me more about how you believe we should get paid for that.
Oh man, thank you for bringing that up, because I've got this like little campaign I've been doing called data rights or human rights, and once a week at least, I'm like, all right guys, this is your friendly reminder that data rights are human rights. Just like your labor. So your labor is being commodified right now. In whatever industry that you work in, they know this is how much we're going to pay this person per hour for their time. And you come in, you do your job, they pay you the money, and you're done, right? Now, these algorithms, they're not just like a little computer thing that's happening that's just churning away. It needs something. An algorithm can't work without a human host, right? So we become the host, and our attention, we're training these algorithms. Every time I go on there, I'm training this algorithm to be more efficient, and I'm generating content. So now there's a platform, there's things for people to come and engage with. So for content creators, you are the platform. There would not be a Facebook without the billions of users that get on it every day and do the clicking and do the creating, take those photos, do that video, create that music, paint that painting, write that song. Without the content creator, there would be no platform. Yeah. We've been led to believe that we need them, and almost the market has been created to where if I want to create an event and I want it to be highly successful, I need to use Facebook.
Yeah.
If I want to have the reach, I am forced to use Facebook. Or if you're not using Facebook directly, you'll use it indirectly as part of your marketing platform. There's whole departments now in companies that are social media jobs. So all the content you create, all the engagement is work. You're spending your time, your labor on these platforms, doing the searches, using that platform, and I think we should get paid for that. Mm-hmm. I mean, they are making billions. These are some of the wealthiest humans that have ever existed, ever. That's not like, within the richest men or women in the last 10 years. No, this is in the entire human existence. We live right now with the richest human beings that have ever existed. And the reason why is because they've been able to exploit the weaknesses in a society and exploiting the work. So I think that these companies should have like a tax, you could say, or something that happens in the background. It's calculated by an algorithm. Says, well, today Alex got up and he sent a couple of messages. So thank you for being an active participant in our platform. Here's a token. Here's some money. Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin or whatever it is, some sort of digital currency that you can utilize within this space just for being an active participant. For content creators, say we utilize blockchain. Now, I'm not going to spend an hour talking about what blockchain is. If you don't know, look it up. So blockchain, if we were to say, you're an artist and you create content and you have this blockchain that's assigned to your whatever you're using, this platform. And anytime you create content, it is time-stamped. It is, everything about it is recorded within this ledger. If I share this photograph, this algorithm knows that it's been shared and it starts to generate wealth on its own. And say that you like the picture that I painted. Oh, this is an awesome picture. And you double tap. You're like, yay. That increases its worth, its social worth within this, digital sphere. Things that go viral, generating content, makes you money. You're right now in the system that we have, you have to go like extremely viral. Like you have to reach a lot of people in order to make any money.
Yeah.
I suggest like transitioning to any sort of engagement creates a micro transaction where it's like, it's not even it's like fractions of a cent.
Yeah.
That's what it would take. And happening every day for everything that you do. And as people share it, it's wealth, your intellectual property, you could say, like all the content you've created increases in value, and really these algorithms and these social media companies could utilize this platform to really change the way that wealth is generated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and of
When
course,
you
I
talk
mean,
about them, like, sorry, not to interrupt, but you
no,
talk
go ahead.
about how they charge companies for ad space and for data based on how we're engaging. Like, they're getting paid for our engagement. Why aren't we?
Yep. That's that's the $1 million question. Why am I not getting paid? I ask that at least a few, like once or twice a month. I'm like, why am I not getting paid for this? Like, why am I not getting paid to aimlessly scroll through and receive this information and create more for the algorithms to analyze and more of our human interactions for them to parse through and decide what they're going to implement into their systems, because their algorithms are getting smarter. They're getting more efficient, not not out of their own accord. They're not just like, I'm going to go read a book. They're not like, let's go to the library and research this. They need us. They need us to engage. They need us to click. They need us to read. They need us to search. And the more we do that, the more efficient they become. And we're essentially training these machines. Anytime, I know I've mentioned this before, anytime that you go to like create a password at a site and they give you that little pop-up that says, are you a human? Which one of these is a traffic sign? You're like, that's so random. That one's a traffic sign, and that one's that's a bus. What they're actually doing is they're getting you to train their street view cars. So Google is getting you to train their street view cars to those little things. And the more you do it, you'll notice they'll get like really blurry picture, but you as a human can tell that that's a street sign because
Yeah.
we have a very complex brain. So you're training the algorithm, and every time you do one of those, they're getting smarter. And imagine that happening a million times a day all across the globe.
Mm-hmm. And now their software is worth more. It's more effective. Like, everything about it improves. But I'm not getting paid for that,
And yeah, my life is not being improved. Well, it's the trickle down economics, because in a way it is. And I've had conversations with people. I have friends who are like, die hard like technocrats. Like, they're like, I just want everything to be technology. It's going to change the world. It's the greatest thing to have ever happened. And they're very much drinking the Kool-Aid, and they'll fight me if I ever even mention that there's something shady going on, So I think that, like, man, I don't even know where I was going with that thought.
Oh, how they're defending. They believe that because the technology is improving society, that they should be giving away their labor to
Oh
technology
yeah,
so that eventually
exactly.
it'll come back around.
Yeah, and it does like improve our life, because now, I can go on Google and, you know, pull up a map and be able to drive to a place and not have to worry about knowing directions, and they make us not only chemically addicted to using them, but like changing our cognitive map. I like to use this
Yeah,
example
like,
with
for
my kids at school.
generations.
Oh yeah, and now it's almost like epigenetic. It's happening within like a shorter time frame. Before, advances were like 10 years, before anything could be implemented. Somebody invented something or put in a patent. 5 years down the road, that patent, they were actually starting to roll out product, and then 10 years of adaptation, so now this tool has adapted in our society, and now people are using it more. So now you're looking at almost like a 15-year time frame where something from its original inception to when it became mainstream and utilized and ubiquitous. Technology, digital technology, social media, and these algorithms and the computing power has reduced that number, where it's like you can come up with an idea, put out a patent or whatever, create it, market it, and then have it to people's hands within a month, and it can go global within a year. And now you've done the work of what would have taken a society 10 years to evolve within a generation, within a year, a fraction of a generation, and that's how fast things are changing. And we're being stunned. We're almost kind of like culture shock. You're
Mm-hmm.
like, because things are changing so fast and people are being left behind. And it's scary what technology has done, but like some of my friends say, it's like they're hopeful and they're optimistic because there is a lot that they are doing to advance our interactions. There is a lot that's happening globally, where more people are connected, where I can know what's going on across the globe in China, so
We'll
I
talk
don't know.
about, I mean, we're kind of getting close to the end, but when you talk about shadow work, like things can do good and they still have a shadow. There's nothing in this world that doesn't have a shadow. So I think that that's like an important thing to remember, is that nothing is all good or all bad. And our belief in that is kind of programmed into us by technology right now. And it's dangerous.
Like othering people.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the saying? Everything has a seed of its opposite. It's the yin and the yang.
Yeah.
Why, like when you see it, it's like everything good could be bad. Everything bad could be good. Within a violent man lives peace. Within a peaceful man lives violence. So it's that idea.
I love
We
that.
want to see everything black and white. We were very binary. It's like everything's ones and zeros, and that's the programs. We talked about this before. It's a ones and a zeros. It's very black and white, and maybe when quantum computing comes about, where we're more qubits than ones and zeros, then we might see the intrinsic nature and the entangled nature of everything.
Yeah, I would love to talk more about quantum computing, because I do think that, our binary situation is definitely a product of our environment, but quantum computing is kind of like at a level that we don't really have access to. Like it's used by governments, like huge scientific institutions. We don't really have as much of that in our consciousness, and I wonder if some of that's intentional.
Could be.
Could be, dude. Could be. Lizard people. All right. Gotta get out of here. I got a podcast to do tonight.
Another? Man, you are busy.
Yes. I can't believe how busy I am when the world is ending.
The world is ending.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.